Today's daf is daf Dalid, and we got up to Ella Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, which is 4 lines down from the top of the page. And now the Gemara is of the opinion, not as we said earlier, that there was a distinction between Torah Shabbal Peh as Halach L'Moshe Sinai, as opposed to the Kra, the Psukim, that seemed to be from the Doraisa, as we're talking about, if you recall, Tosfos. But let's see if we can justify the need for both the Halacha Moshe Sinai and the Psukim, and deriving it from the Psukim, as far as that period of time from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Aleph Tishrei. El Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, we need a special Halacha Moshe Sinai to allow Charisha for the sake of a Yalda. Yalda means a young sapling. And that was the case that we had in the list yesterday of Halach L'Moshe Sinai's. Amongst them were the case of the 10 saplings in a base saw. Kroi L'Meisar's Kana. But on the other hand, I need the Psukim to prohibit, in the case of a mature tree, that during that 30-day period, we are asur, and plowing becomes forbidden under the law of Tosefes Shvius. Gemara says, wait a second, if you need a halacha Moshe seem to be matir, the case of a young sapling, then lavne melus kenasira. The implication is for sure, we derive that if it wasn't a sapling with the special halacha Moshe Visine heter in the case of 10 saplings in a base saw, it would have been asur. So in the case of his Kana, certainly it's asur. The Torah only granted permission to plant and plow saplings on that 30-day period before Rosh Hashanah, the pre-Shemitah Tosefet. But obviously, there must have been an Isser, otherwise why did the Torah have to be matir? And the Isser would apply to a regular classic Zakena. Ella, therefore the Gemara says, let's see if we can find a different justification for requiring both Halacha Moshe Sinai and the Psukim. Hilchos Rabbi Shmuel and Kroi Rabbi Akiva. Now this doesn't mean that we need both the Halacha Moshe Sinai and the Psukim, the scriptural verses. They're not both necessary according to any one particular opinion. Rabbi Nechunya rather is saying that the Halacha Moshe Sinai is going to teach us the heter in the case of netios, of 10 saplings in the base, and we're allowed to plow them all the way up to the Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah. And Elchinami, the implication is that if you were plowing in advance of a Shemitah for a Skena, it's asur, but that only reflects the Shita of Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Shmuel himself holds there's no psukim that teaches Tosefet Shvius to prohibit Charisha, because he interprets the pasuk that says, at the beginning, at the plowing and at the reaping, you shall rest. That's teaching us the law regarding Shabbos. Rabbi Kiva, on the other hand, he derives the pre-Shemitah Tosefes prohibition against plowing from those verses, and he doesn't have the Halacha Moshe Sinai at all. So now the Gemara is staunch on its assumption that the Tosefes Iser about Charisha applies according to the Torah law only to the last 30 days, whether it's derived according to Rabbi Akiva from Halacha Moshe Sinai or according to Psukim. According to Rabbi Akiva from Psukim or according to Rabbi Shmuel from Halacha Moshe Sinai. Then came along the Pesach of Beisil Beit Shammai, and they in introduced an injunction to prohibit from Pesach or from Shavuos, depending upon whether it's a stay Elon or a stay Beis Habal. So therefore, Rav Gamliel was justified in nullifying the Tosefes restriction. That means the Tosefes restriction of Beis Hillel Beis Shammai, not of the Doraisa, which is either Kroy or Rabbi Akiva or Halacha Moshe Sinai according to Rabbi Shmuel. That they don't have the authority to nullify, but rather they nullify Beis Hillel Beis Shammai, and Beis Hillel Beis Shammai made that condition, as we said earlier, that would allow a later Beis Din to nullify that prohibition. And now we have another explanation, which is Rabbi Yochanan's explanation. And he's going to go very far and justify the possibility that Rabbi Gamliel's Beis Din nullified even the 30-day pre-Shemitah Tosefes Easter. And how is that possible? From Gamliel Beis Din Meraisa Botalahu, my timer, Gomar, Shabbos, Mishabbos Beishis. There's Xer Shava. The word Shabbos appears both in, of course, Maisa Beishis, and then we have, and that's in Shmos Perek Chaf Aleph. Then we have the word Shabbos in Vayikra Chaf Hey with regard to Shemitah. Malahalan Hiasur L'fanei Lachra Mutarim. Just like in the case of the seventh day of the week, the day of creation, when the Torah says it's a Shabbos of rest, holy to Hashem, again in Shmos Perek Chaf Aleph, that's only the 24 hours of Shabbos, not before, not after. Is Afkan, so too here, with the Shabbos, Vayikra Chaf Hey, it's referring to L'fanei Lachra Mutarim. And in that case, we derive from this Xer Shava of Shabbos, the header of pre-Shemitah, of Tosefes Shemitah with regard to Charisha. So Rav Gamliel is basing himself on Xer Shava, and therefore he's empowered to nullify even the Doraisa. So that's what the Gemara is suggesting here in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. But Maskef lo Rav Ashi, Mandi Amar Hilchasa, Asi Xer Shava Yakra Hilchasa, Mandi Amar Kra, Asi Xer Shava V'Yakra Kra. It doesn't make sense, argues Rav Ashi, that Xer Shava should be validated with the power of undermining a Doraisa, whether it be according to those who derive Tosefes Shvius from Halacha Moshe Sinai, or those who derive from Psukim, as we discussed at great length. It makes no sense that Xer Shava should now undermine and invalidate a halacha that's Doraisa. Hello, Rav Ashi. We have to suggest a different explanation from Gamliel, who Beis Din is Savrei to Rabbi Shmuel, the Omer Hilchos HaGemir. We'll link up Rabbi Gamliel with Rabbi Shmuel, and we're talking about Halacha Moshe Sinai. V'chigmir Hilchasa Bizman Beis HaMikdash Kayim. Dumya Denisa Chamayim. Aval Bizman Shem Beis HaMikdash Kayim Lo. We have Halacha Moshe Sinai, according to Rabbi Shmuel, that connects the case of Tosefes Shvius with the case of Nisa Chamayim on Chag HaShavuot, on Chag HaSukkos, and with the halacha of Arava during Chag HaSukkos. And just like 2 out of the 3 of these Hilchos HaGemir are limited to Bizman Beis HaMikdash Kayim, obviously there's no Nisa Chamayim on the Mizbeach. When there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Mizbeach. Obviously there's no Hakofas on Mizbeach within Arava if there's no Mizbeach after the Churban Abayis. And so too, the Halacha Moshe Sinai regarding Tosefes Shvius only applies Bizman Abayis, Bizman She'en Abayis Kayim Lo. And therefore, we never had a halacha Moshe Sinai to prohibit Tosefes Shvius after the period of Churban Abayis. So Ram Gamliel is not undermining a Doraisa. He agrees that 30 days before Rosh Hashanah is simply an Iser Karisha Doraisa, but ever he says that that law was valid as long as Beis HaMikdash Kayim, and after its destruction, it's no longer Kayim. So now we don't have to add, according to Rashi, that Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai had this stipulation regarding their extension of the Iser Tosefes Shvius way back till Pesach and Shavuos. We don't need that. Excuse me for 1 minute. So in sum, there's no halacha Moshe Sinai after Churban Abayis. Shalom B'zman HaMikdash, there's no binding halacha of a requirement of Tosefes Shvius. The Mishnah says, "Avalo mimei agshamim umimei akilon." This is the Iser of Tircha Yisera on Chol HaMoed. In the cases of a pool of rainwater or water from a well, so the Gemara says, "Bishlei mimei kilon ika Tircha Yisera." Certainly, when you take a pail and you have to dig the pail in order to draw the water from the well, that for sure, understandably, involves excessive exertion. But if you have a pool of rainwater gathered together and it's adjacent to a field, watering such a pool does not involve exertion. You don't have to draw it with a pail. Just simply guide the water, trace the path in the ground with your foot, from the pool to the field. The water flows through it automatically, and that's it. And the Gemara answers, Amarav Ilah, Amarav Yochanan, Kizera make Yishamim, ought to make Yilon. You're right, that according to the strict letter of the law, make Yishamim should be fine. It's a cinch. It doesn't require a pail to withdraw the water. There's no Tirchi Yisera. But we're going to put it all together in one category, make Yishamim and make Yilon. If we allow you to do this malach in the case of make Yishamim, you're going to take the extension and apply it even to make Yilon. Rav Ashi Amar, an alternative, is make Yishamim gufayu lidei make Yilon asu. What happens is that when you have rainwater in a pool, eventually it's going to be like water in a well. You're going to require at the end of the day a pail to draw the water. The water is removed from the pool, the water level drops, and ultimately, even in the case of a pool made of rainwater, you're going to require exertive activity of drawing the water with a pail. And this machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Ashi is really a machlokes about how to interpret Rabbi Zera. The Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah, Amar Shmuel, Naharos hamochchim mayim min agamim. When you have streams that draw water from ponds, so they're rainwater in ponds. Mutal hashkas behem b'chol shel Moed. Rabbi Zera, again in a whole tradition that dates back to Shmuel, permits you to water from them lahashkas behem b'meshach chol hamoed, during the chol hamoed period. The ponds contain an abundance of rainwater, such that the streams which they feed are not in danger of drying out, of running dry. Mar Islay, the Rabbi Zera, according to one opinion, that's Rav Ashi, he accepts the view of Rabbi Zera, and therefore we can be makil, and we don't have to assume the possibility that the water will dry out. Mar Lesley, the Rabbi Zera, but Rabbi Yochanan, who is machmir, and he says he rejects the shita and the leniency of Rabbi Zera. And basically, what Rav Ashi was arguing is that the reason why watering from a pool of rainwater would be prohibited is the fear that the water level will reach such a low level that he would have to draw the water with a pail. And Rav Ashi otherwise would have allowed you to water from pail. So therefore, he subscribes to Rabbi Zera's view. And in the case of a pond-fed stream, where there's no fear that the water will drop in a low level, watering from them on Chol Hamoed would be absolutely permissible. Rabbi Yochanan, on the other hand, says that even when there's no fear of the water level dropping, we still have to prohibit the use of using a pool of rainwater, because of the decree that from the rainwater you might come to draw water from a well. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, does not accept the view and the kula of Rabbi Zera. The Gemara says, let's look at Rabbi Zera Gufa. Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yimon Shmuel. Naharos Hamoshchem Mayim Agavim, streams that draw water from ponds. Mutar lahashkos me'em b'chol hamoed. It's permitted to draw water from them during Chol Hamoed. Gemara says, how could this possibly be? Eisvei Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Zera. What about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says, Avalomi make Geshamim, Avalomi make Kilon. Now, in the case of Megishamim, we have to prohibit it because of the fear that either the water level will drop so drastically that the person's going to have to draw with pails from the depths, or alternatively, that it might lead to his using the Mei Kilon. So therefore, in the case of the ponds, which is Reb Zera's case of Naharos, Hamoshchem Mayim min Hagamim, Hagamim are these ponds, then how could we make it? Hani. Amalei, Yimabri, he calls him his son. Hani Agamim, the Bavel, the Mayim de la Paskudam. Kemai de la Paskudam. The ponds of Babylonia are like water that doesn't drop at all. It doesn't stop. It always flows. Now, again, this is Shmuel, who lives in Babylonia, and he's discussing the ponds and the streams in his country. There's an abundance of water in the ponds of Babylonia, no concern that the water will stop flowing into the streams. The Mishnah is talking about a case where there's reason to worry that the water level might drop and create the need to draw from the depths. And we're not dealing with some sort of low plume. Or gzera ut. We learned in the Brayso, Psikos, Fabrechos, Sinismalu Mayim, May Erev Yontif. You have certain types of pools and ditches and so forth that were filled with water before Yontif. Also, Hashkes Me'em B'chol Hamoed. You're not allowed to draw water from them during Chol Hamoed. Now, in the case of Psikos and Brechos, we're talking about reservoirs. The rainwater is kept in these reservoirs. The only difference in Psikos, which are perfectly finished, Brechos are well built, but the amount of water in these reservoirs is limited. We're concerned, again, the water level will drop. As we said before, the person will draw the water with a pail. However, im hoisa amas mayim overes beineim mutar. If you have, let's say, water in the reservoirs that in event they become depleted, he'll be able to draw water from the channel, which is constantly being fed from a spring, then it's perfectly mutar. Amar Papa, but we have to limit this case and the heter involved here to ruba chalosa soda shosmiyot mayim. So majority of that particular field drinks, meaning it's capable of being watered from that water canal at one particular time. In other words, the canal is fed by a natural spring, siphoning off a large amount of water from it at one time, and that could cause it to run dry temporarily. Rav Papa states that if at least the majority of the field can be watered before this occurs, when they water the reservoirs, the ditches, and the pools, because between the channel and the reservoirs, there's bound to be enough water to water the entire field. However, if the majority of the field cannot be watered at one time from the water channel, he's not allowed to use the water from the reservoirs because there's a fear that the water will be depleted. He'll come to draw water with a pail, and that's called Tirfi Yisera. Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yashi Omar, Afal pisha ain ruba shalosis. So we don't need to limit it and restrict the heter to a case where the majority of the field, drinks. In other words, even if the majority of the field does not drink and cannot be watered from the water canal at one time, nevertheless came on to come mashcha v'yaisya, since the water is constantly flowing. Meimar Amar, a person will always say, Ilo shasya l'chad yoma, if the field cannot drink on one particular day, then I'm laid back about a tishtei litrei utlasa yomin. It could drink over the next 2 or 3 days. Therefore, he's not going to trouble bringing water from a different source. And basically, what we're saying here is that whatever watering I can accomplish today from the existing supply in the channel and reservoir, I will do so. And whatever cannot be done today, I'll do after the channel refills. And here we have a quote of the Ravid. The Rav Ashi's heter, his kula, applies only where the water channel empties into the reservoir. In that case, we say that the person will wait patiently until the reservoirs are replenished and will not hasten to draw water with a pail or bring it from a different source. But if the water channel merely passes through the field but does not feed the reservoirs, then watering from the reservoirs is forbidden. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa, brecha no tefes mayim, right? There's trickling water, mistei beis hashalcha, from an irrigated field. Mutal hashkas stay hashalchin acheretz. It's permissible to water from that pool another irrigated field. So you have 2 irrigated fields situated on an incline. One is higher than the other. There's flowing spring adjacent to the upper pool, and there's a pool between the upper and lower fields. You should have a picture of this. Thus, when the upper field is watering from the spring, some of the water trickles into the lower pool. And the Brisa establishes that it's permitted to water the lower field from the water of this higher pool. The Gemara asks for Havida de Askia. Again, we have the whole question and the chash that the water in the pool is likely to be diminished and the water level will drop and the person will decide to draw water from a different source. Why are you permitting this? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Adayin Himitafefes. Right now, the water is trickling from the upper irrigated field and its pool into the lower pool. So we're not concerned that the pool will dry up. Right now, it's dribbling. It's trickling. Amar Abaye says, hold on, everything. For who shall pasak mayim rishon? I have to add the following stipulation: that the first spring, which flows into the upper base hashloch and irrigated field, has not stopped running. If the spring, which waters the upper field, stops flowing, then even though water is still dropping from the upper field into the pool, one may not water the pool, the lower field from the pool, because the concern is that the water will stop. You will have to come to do a terchi yisera to bring water from a different spring. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Reb Shimon ben Asya Omer, with regard to watering fields. Shtei arugos zola ma'il v'zu. I don't know what arugos means. Perhaps arugos means furrows or beds, and one's higher than the other. Lo yidle, we have to see what the word lo yidle means. Lo yidle min hatachtona v'yashkes elyona. He's not allowed to draw water from the water supply in the lower one and water the upper one. That's already a terchi yisera. The other direction will be a lot easier. It's always easier to go down than to go up. You're not going up against gravity. Also, I can't over Abelazar, Rav Shimon afilu aruga achas, chetzia nomuch, chetzia gavoa, lo yadlo mimakom nomuch, v'yashkel mimakom gavoa. Tana Rabbanan, we learned to the Brisa Madlin, liyarakos kedei liochlan. Again, that word madlin, let's say we'll draw for the sake of vegetables in order to eat them on Chol Moed. So this means that you're allowed to draw water for the sake of watering vegetables if his intention is to pluck and then eat those vegetables on Chol Hamoed. The watering is necessary to keep them moist and fresh. The Im Bishvili Aposo also, if he wants to improve their presentation, and they should grow better for picking after the festival, after Yom Tov, that's also, that's prohibited. So we're talking about watering through means that do not involve exertion. And while one may water an irrigated field on Chol Hamoed, but not to do so the entire festival may result in an irretrievable loss, Hefsei Meruba, watering a field which can subsist on rainwater is forbidden. The Bryson House states that even a rainwater field may be watered if the purpose in doing so is to enhance the plant's growth for the consumption of those plants on Chol Hamoed. If, however, his intention is to improve the vegetables for Li'achar Hamoed, then watering is asur. Ravina, the Rabba Tosfata, Avakai, Azlei, Bi'archa, they're on the road. Chazilahu Gavra Davidoli Davla Bechula de Moed. On Chol Hamoed, Chula de Moed, this certain man was drawing water with a pail, watering a vegetable patch. Amalei Rabba Tosavla Ravina, Leisem Lar L'Shamta, let's put him into Shamta. He's violating the rabbinic Isser here. Amalei Ravina said, hold on a second, Matanya, we have a brisa that seems to support the action of this particular person. Madlin lirakos eliochlan. We can draw for vegetables in order to eat them. So although this fellow is watering the vegetables for the sake of eating them on Chol Hamoed, he's not doing anything wrong. Amalei, Ravatosfos said in response, Visavis my madlin my. And now we have to talk about what the word madlin means. Does madlin mean he's drawing water? No. My madlin. Here we take a look on Tafdalim. Madlin means shlufe. It means pulling out vegetables from amongst other vegetables.